Okay, the first thing that we're going to want to do is to draw out our maze. So click on the stage backdrop, click on backdrops at the top, and as before we need to design, like we did with the road, we need to design a maze. You can choose whatever colours you like. I'm going to fill the background in black, and then using the white brush tool on a fairly big setting, probably bigger than that. I'm going to draw out a maze that I want the character to have to navigate. You can make it thinner and have a smaller character, or you can use the thick brush like I have here. Okay, so once you've done that, what we can do is, using the shrink tool, we can shrink down our cat, which is what we're going to be moving around the maze. You can change it to any character that you like. Move it to a suitable size that you think is going to make it fairly challenging. You might want to add some extra bits of challenge by clicking on the stage again, going back to backdrops. So I'm going to select the black tool and just make some little bits just a little bit thinner, just to make it slightly more difficult to navigate around. You can always add these on later if you find that your game is too easy or too difficult. You could perhaps make it a little bit wider. Okay, so I think that's going to be what my maze is going to look like. Might be slightly too thin down here. I may have to make my cat smaller, or what I'll probably do is just widen out that part of the maze there. Okay, you can, spend a bit of time doing this just to make it sort of a playable game. So once you've got something like this, making sure that, like I say, there's nothing that's going to be too thin so that your cat can't fit through. What we're going to do is click back onto Sprite 1 and make sure that Costumes is selected by clicking on Costumes up here. And what Costumes is it's just a different version of the same sprite. So we're going to have one that's pointing to the right, and we're going to call it right. And then we're going to have another one that points to the left. Now we don't want this one, so I'm going to click on the cross to delete that. And I'm going to right click on this one and go to duplicate, so we've got two. However, on this one we want it pointing to the left, so I'm going to click on flip left to right, and obviously rename that one to left. We're also going to want a sprite that is the game over sprite, so we're going to duplicate the right one again. You can do whatever you like with this really, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spin it upside down and maybe use the fill tool to make it look like it's not very well. Okay, so that's my game over one. I'm going to put some text on there as well, which says start again. You'll probably find that you have to make that text big in order for it to be seen. I'm going to go with a red colour. So that's going to be our start again. So I'll type that in there as the name. Press enter just to set it. If we click back on the right one, I'm probably going to have to make my cat a little bit smaller. So I'm going to use the shrink tool. I'm going to try and use the shrink tool to shrink that down. Okay, that should fit through all of the gaps now. Now what we can do is we can add some code onto the cat to make it move. So click back on scripts so that we get all of our menus open here. And what we're going to say is, on the event that the flag is clicked, what we first want the sprite to do is to always go to the start, which is going to be here. So if you remember our x and y coordinates, that's going to be roughly -194, 130. So in motion, we're going to go to -194, 130, and we can test it by pressing the flag, and it goes roughly to where we want it to go. Then what we want to happen is When we press the right key, we want the cat to turn to face the left and move to the left, so the opposite to what the key is. And if we press the left key, we want it to turn to the right and move to the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a control, then a forever loop, because we want this to happen for the entire game. And inside there we're going to have an if statement. So we're going to say if, and then in the sensing menu, if key right arrow is pressed, then firstly we want the costume of the sprite to change to the right costume. So we're going to choose switch to costume right to make it point to the right. We also need to make the, when the right key is pressed, we're going to move it to the left because we're doing opposites. So when the right key is pressed, we want it to move to the left. So in the motion, we have an option down here which is change X by and then a number. So as we want to move it to the left, we have to change the, if you think about in maths when you have a graph, X is the across the horizontal axis, and if you want to move to the right, then the numbers go up. If you move to the left, then the numbers go down. So what we have to do is we have to change X by roughly -2. You can change that number if you want yours to go faster or slower, increase it to go faster, make it say -1 if you want it to go slower. So what that'll happen if we click the flag now, if I press the right arrow on the keyboard, notice that the sprite has turned to the left and is moving to the left. So now what we want to do is we want to do the same thing, but we want it to move to the right when the left key is pressed. Now instead of doing all this again, if you right click on the if and go to duplicate, it will make another block exactly the same. Put it underneath the if, not inside it. It has to be underneath it. And we're saying if key left arrow is pressed, switch the costume to the right, and because we want it to move to the right, we need to change X by 2. So now if I press the flag, when I press the right key it moves to the left, when I press the left key it moves to the right. We now need to do something similar to make it go up and down. So we're going to put another if statement in. In fact we'll put another if statement in because there's too much that's different. So if sensing key up is pressed, we're not going to change the costume because assuming they're already facing the right way, we want the sprite to move down. So what we do in motion is we choose change Y, because in maths the Y axis is the vertical axis, up and down. So change Y by, and because we want it to go down, excuse the picture, if we want it to go down then we change Y by -2 and that'll make it go down. If we want it to do the same with the opposite key, make another if by duplicating it. Say when the up arrow is pressed, we're going to, and again, we're going to, not up arrow, sorry, the down arrow. So when the down arrow is pressed, we want it to move up, so we move it by 2. So now when I click on the flag, I'm pressing the right key, and it moves to the left. I press the left key, move to the right. When I press up, it should go down, and when I press down, it should go up. If any of that doesn't work, you're going to need to look back at what you've set, and that's going to confuse the person playing this game and make it difficult and annoying, just like Flappy Birds, and hopefully make a fortune. Okay, now to make it cause the game to start again when it's touching the edges of our maze, what we need to do is we're going to put in another if statement. Again, make sure it goes underneath, and we're going to sense whether or not we are touching a colour. So is this sprite touching colour? And if you click on the colour, hover over the colour that you want to cause the sprite to have to start again. So in my case it's black. Click on the black and it'll set it as there. So if the sprite is touching black, then we want a certain thing to happen. Now what we're going to want it to do to start with is in the looks menu, we're going to switch to costume start again to make it turn upside down and look rather poorly. Then what we're going to happen is we're going to make it wait there for a second, because it's going to be a timed game. It will punish the user for touching the edges. So we're going to go with control and then wait a number of seconds. 2 seconds is probably sufficient, but again you can change that if you want to. Then what we want to happen is we want it to go back to the start and switch to the correct costume. Now we've already got our go to up here. Now to duplicate that, what you have to do is you have to split it up from everything else. Duplicate it, and then if I just scroll down a little bit, we can make it go back to the start, and we also want it to switch to costume right so that it's pointing in the right direction. So in looks, we're going to say switch to costume right so it doesn't still look dead. So now when we click on the flag, if I go across and touch the black, it says start again and it goes back to the start. So if I go over here, start again and then back to the start. So the idea will be that the person playing will have to try and navigate their way through the maze, which is obviously quite difficult. We also need to add in a switch to costume right at the beginning, just in case the person picks up the game and the wrong costume's been already selected. So what that'll do is just make sure that when it goes to here at the start, it'll automatically face in the right direction. Now as this game is going to be timed, if you go into operators, if you go into sensing, tick the box that says timer and it will give you a timer. I'm going to put it up out the way up here. You'll notice that it keeps going round. You can ignore that for now. But what we want to happen is when the game starts, so when the flag is clicked, we want the timer to reset. So if we drop a reset timer here, every time we click the flag, the timer will go back to 0. Now what we're going to do is, when the sprite gets up here, so our cat, we want there to be something that it needs to touch for it to finish, so like a star or a treasure box or a door or something like that. And then what it's going to do is it's going to store the time, and if it's beaten a high score, it'll record it as the best time. If not, it'll just display what time you got in this run. So the first thing we're going to have to do is put a sprite up here. So if we click on this new sprite from library, and as I said, you can choose anything you like. I'd go with it being sensible. So we'll put a star in. It's already called star 2, so we don't need to change that, and it's actually quite a good size. So what we can now do is if we click back onto sprite 1 to see our code, we can add an if statement in to say if it's touching the star, then we need it to do something. So using control, we're going to put an if in. I'm going to scroll down and make sure it goes underneath the others. It should have a nice dead straight line down here, and we're going to sense whether or not it is touching the star, so star 2. If it is, then there's a number of things that we need it to do. The first thing it needs to do is to store our time and display it as our last time. So if we click on data, we need to make a variable. Remember, a variable is something that we can store data in, and we can change it, and we can display it, and we can delete it. So we're going to make a new variable, and we'll call it last time, so the time that they got on their last run. Press OK and it will make it appear, so I'm going to just put it down here out the way. While we're here, we might as well make the next one, so we're going to make another variable called best time and press OK, and that will appear, and we can move that down to the bottom. So what we're going to say is if our cat is touching the star, then we need to display the timer in this variable here. So what we can do is we can say set, I know it says best time at the moment, we can change that, set the last time to be the timer. So if we go back into sensing, there's a block called timer. So we're saying set whatever's in the timer to be in here. What we then need to happen is we need to check whether or not it's beaten the high score. However, on the first time through, the high score, the best time, is going to be 0. So we first need to check whether or not it's our first go. So to do that, we're going to put an if-else statement in. So to start with, we'll put this just underneath the set time. So it's always going to set the last time to be whatever the timer is. And we're going to say if the, in operators, sorry, if the, and we're going to use the equals one, and we're going to say if the best time, so that's in data, if the best time is equal to 0, that means it's our first time playing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the best time to be whatever the timer says, which we've already now set as being last time. So we can say set best time to be last time. If it isn't, then we need to check if it's beaten the high score. So in there we're going to put another if statement on. This is called a nested if statement because we've got an if within an if within an if. So we know that it's not our first go. So if best time is 0, well, it isn't. It goes to the else part. So now we need to check if it's beat the high score. So in operators, we're going to say if the last time, which is the time we've just got, our score, is less than, which means it's quicker, than the best time, then we need to set the best time to be the last time. Okay, so that will display our high score, if you like. What we then need to happen is we need the program to stop. So in control, we need to put a stop all in. Now you need to be careful where you put this, and I'm going to have to double check that it's in the right place once I've put it there. So if it's touching the star, do all of this and then stop. So it needs to be here. It needs to be inside this if here. Okay, so you're just going to have to be a bit careful about where that goes. If it doesn't work, check that it's 2 lines up, if you like. Now I'm going to test this, and there's a fair chance that it won't work, so fingers crossed. So our timer's reset. I can move it about. I'm not going to navigate all the way around, so I'm going to cheat and drag it over here. I'm going to move to the timer. Because it was our first go, the timer is displayed as the best time. However, if I click on the flag to have another go, and I beat that time, it has now set it to be that time. If I click on the flag again, but I'm a bit slower this time, so it's over 2 seconds already, move it across. My last time was this, but it hasn't beat my best time. So I can click on the flag to restart the game. So hopefully that should have worked. While you're testing it, obviously this is going to remain as the best time, which is not very realistic. If you want to change it, if you change it to slider by right clicking on it, and you can change that back to 0 and then change it back to a normal readout, and it will reset that back to 0. One last thing you might want to do just to tidy it up is every time you start the game you might want it to get rid of the last time. So to do that, in data you can just say set the last time to be 0, so that every time you click on the flag it sets the last time to 0. You don't have to put that in, it just depends how you want your game to be set up. Other things that you can do in this, you could possibly think about having things moving around the screen by using a glide. So in motion you could have another sprite and say glide. You could have it so you get to the star and it loads up another level by changing the backdrop. You could have it moving faster or moving slower, or well, as I said, it's entirely up to you. But if you do make millions of pounds off this, remember where you heard it first.